Memphis Grizzlies don't feel they feel a little bit not dead because Ja's out and all that stuff, but they're 0-4. Have you looked at their net rating through 4 games?
Give it to me.
Minus 8.4 per 100 possessions. That's 23rd in the league because there are some really stinky teams right now. Washington, minus 17. Washington might be the worst team in the last 5 years. Because Jordan Poole does not give a fuck, and that team is just bad.
Can I give you their net rating?
Houston is worse than
Desmond Bane off the court. So
yeah,
I do.
You have it?
No, I got it.
You need me
With him on, they're -4. So not great, but that's still better than what you just gave us as their overall. So they're +4 when he's on, basically, compared to their normal. When he's off the court, their overall net rating is -17.
For fuck's sake.
And that's a player who in and of himself is not exactly some sort of elite offensive creator. I mean, we talked a lot in our season preview about how can he take a leap, and we can get into some of that because I do have thoughts there, but this is not like Steph on-off for the Warriors, where it's like, well, yeah, no shit, he's like the most game-changing offensive force the league has seen in years. So, yeah, you're going to struggle to replicate that when he's off the court, even though you have Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins and whatever. It's like, no, this is Desmond Bane. He's like a fringe all-star. People were mad that he got a first extension max this summer because they didn't think he was worthy of that. This is not somebody who should be breaking your offense when he steps off the court. And they just look hapless a lot of the time on that side of the floor, even with Bane on, but especially when he's off.
They don't have another trusty offensive creator. I mean, they don't. They have one guy right now who is playing real minutes who can actually initiate offense for them. And even
Smart.
I like Desmond Bane a lot.
I thought you were saying besides Bane. Smart is somewhat of that.
Yeah, but I think we've known for a long time what the limits of Marcus Smart creating offense for you kind of is. We understand the limits of that. That's not going to solve this issue. He is additive if you have he makes much more sense as your second or third guy if Ja Morant is around. And he's not. This is a team last year but in the last 2 years, net rating +5 last year, +6.2 the year before. Right now they have an expected win. If their net rating held for the entire season, this is the expected wins of 20.8. They've just been absolutely horrendous. And some of this is I think somewhat predictable just because Ja is such a big part of the team. He's not around, all of that stuff. But for a team that has guys that we really like, has Jaren Jackson Jr., has Marcus Smart, has Desmond Bane, has even bench guys and young guys you'd expect to take some kind of a step forward. And a coach that I think has good stuff and runs good stuff and I think is pretty well thought of in Taylor Jenkins. It shouldn't feel this underwater this early, even without Ja. This is where I kind of fall on this. That raises some real alarm bells for me.
So to give some of the statistical context here, teams are raining in threes against them so far. 42% opponent three-point percentage on 160 attempts. So maybe you could take a little bit of issue with the number of attempts that they're allowing. But for instance, against Dallas on Monday, right? In the beginning of the game, Grant Williams got hot. Late in the game, Derrick Jones Jr. got hot. That's going to fry your numbers to an extent early in the season if you have a night where Derrick Jones bombs threes against you. And yes, it's Luka and everything, but come on, that's not going to necessarily continue. At the same time, they are 25th in offense, and there's really no signs of life there at all. So when I've watched them, I think the defense stands up no matter who's out there. And they're playing a lot of young guys. Yes, the Ja stuff gets attention. Steven Adams, Brandon Clark, both out. We know that was going to be a problem for them. But I think defensively, even when it's Tillman and it's, Roddy and LaRavia and Derrick Rose and whatever, I think even if it's not just Jaren Jackson, I trust their defense. It's just the offense, to your point about the lack of creators, but also just not really any shooting. I think that's one of the things that happens when Bane is now on the ball so much. And like I've liked that Bane is attacking more in transition, just more aggressive overall. There was a moment, I think, at the end of the first quarter where in that Dallas game, he just dribbled it up and launched a transition pull-up three. He's like, we just need something, and it's going to be this. I like that aggressiveness, but now he's not spacing the floor anymore, and it's David Roddy or Marcus Smart or whoever suddenly needing to knock down a wide open three, and they don't do that as well as obviously Desmond Bane when the ball's in Ja Morant's hands. So all of that trickling down, and I would say the last thing offensively that just makes life so hard for them is they don't have anybody who can finish at the freaking basket. Xavier Tillman is like a walking missed layup this year, and that was a problem in the playoffs last year. Anytime he's had a big role, he cannot finish because he's not super athletic and he doesn't seem to have the touch that you need. And so even like an effective pick and roll, something basic with Smart and Tillman with Jackson and Bane spacing, you'd think like, okay, those are all credible NBA players. They could get a decent offensive possession out of that. But the defense just doesn't even have to worry about Tillman at the basket anymore. They know Smart might take a bad shot. And so you start to see the breakdowns and the lack of shooting, the lack of finishing, the lack of creators. It doesn't feel like they have much in the way of an answer offensively. It feels very worst case scenario very quickly. And I don't see a way that they get out of that without just staying afloat until Ja's back or maybe a trade sooner than we expected. I mean, I think we're there already.
I agree. Tillman at 53% at the rim this year.
And he was at like 60 in the
for a
playoffs
center
last year around.
63% in the playoffs, 71% in the regular season last year.
But didn't play a lot.
But
as much.
Yeah, played 21 minutes a game in 52 games. And then in the playoffs, he played over 30 minutes a game. And we saw what happened. Then we're seeing it now in the regular season when he's playing close to the same minutes per game as he did in the playoffs. They also have Aldama and Kennard out with injury. I think getting those guys back at least gives them some juice. I think Kennard is just a shot maker and taker, is someone that at least can give you something. But if you're Brendon, I think if your offense is dependent on like Luke Kennard,
no, but it will help.
But that's dire. If I'm like, well, can Luke Kennard like turn this around? That's dire. And then they also signed Bismack Biyombo, which I like that as a signing. He's a competent like rollman big who will probably finish better than Tillman. But that's also not a real answer for what is kind of going on here. I still think a Robert Williams trade makes sense for them. I don't really know if there's it's too early for there to be a wing trade or something like that to me, just based on I don't know why anyone, unless you're overpaying, is going to give up someone like that right now that could really feel like the biggest hole on this roster. But I would, if I'm them, Brendon, I think I'm a little nervous about being able to tread water till Ja gets back at this point. I mean, you have 21 more games to go right now. Are you going to be
even being 500 would
like,
be a miracle? It feels like.
And I would not be optimistic they get there. And I think where that puts you as a franchise for this year, there's not like an easy way for that to get better. There's not a way that this doesn't feel like a season that's going to end in a great place, barring something just miraculous over the next couple of weeks, where they like maybe are like a couple games above 500 somehow.
And even when Ja gets back, what is that, right? He hasn't been on an NBA court since the playoffs last year, but before that was on and off and was fine in the playoffs. But I don't think anyone would say he looked like the peak version of Ja Morant, even in that Lakers series. So for the games he did play, I don't think you would ideally want to treat that as snap your fingers and things are back to normal if you're Memphis. It kind of made me start to think, Chris, about kind of big picture with this group. And I just went back. I think the best version of this team was 21-22 last season when they were the 2 seed that year, and maybe they were the 1 seed that year, and won 56 games, pushed the Warriors to 6 in that playoff series in the second round, and Grizzlies fans felt like if Ja doesn't get hurt in that series, title could have been ours, right? I think that was their best iteration. That was only 18 months ago, and already since then, Kyle Anderson is gone. Dylan Brooks is gone. Tyus Jones is gone. DeAnthony Melton is gone. And that's 4 veteran difference makers who, as much as you can explain why they left, and we might have all agreed with the moves that they made, you also add Adams and Clark being out, and the ground just sort of came out from underneath this team in terms of young talent in a way that it doesn't feel like they expected to happen. It felt like they just thought sort of that they could keep hitting on the Desmond Bains and the Meltons, who they traded for but broke out with them after barely playing in Phoenix, and even the John Conchars and Santi Aldamas that they kind of pulled out of a hat. None of that has happened for basically since then. They have not hit on one of these picks. I don't know if we want to talk about some of those guys and how they've performed. I have some Roddy thoughts because I know you have believed in him at times. But they just, all that went away. And now they're just left with those guys suddenly needing to play and none of them being ready to contribute. Like, those bench lineups are ugly when they're out there. Nobody seems to have any clue what to do.
Yeah, let's talk about Roddy, because he's kind of the one that I kind of earmarked as maybe could to do something positive for this team this year. Zaire Williams as well has started for them.
Still like him.
Not
Still
been
like
great, still like him, but yeah, but there's, and look, and the other thing to note here is the schedule. Have you looked at their upcoming schedule? Because it's a little bit of everything. I'm going to run through some of their upcoming games. Then we'll talk about Roddy and wrap this up. They have the Jazz on November 1st. They get the Grizzlies, get the Blazers on Friday, Blazers again on Sunday. So like maybe you get a win in there. Then it's Miami, Utah again, the Clippers and the Lakers both in LA. You get Vic and the Spurs, then the Celtics, the Rockets, the Suns, the Wolves, and the Jazz again. And then the Mavs, the Suns, the Mavs, the Rockets. Like you have the Blazer games, but there's not another game in there where you're just like, yeah, man, that's a cakewalk. Like they could get it done. And even the Blazers, the way that Memphis is playing, they shouldn't just bank on getting 2 games on the road against Portland on a Friday-Sunday series where they're going to see them twice. Like, they might get 1, but if this was a full-strength team, we expect, okay, they go in and take care of it, they get 2, and they could kind of normalize things. I would not have any confidence that they have games up in line here that they're going to be able to just take advantage of in some way. That feels very unlikely to me.
No, I don't trust them against anybody right now. But obviously being in the West, obviously some of the East teams that you listed off, it's not great. Let's talk about the young guys, but I also was just kind of sitting thinking, could they not have just tried to get somebody in the kind of shot chucker guard category? And maybe they thought Rose would be that. I think everybody turned their nose up at that deal when it came down. I don't know if anyone understood the faith in Derrick Rose to be that for this team. But even trying to separate, like, okay, yeah, you could say, well, Dennis Schroeder, I'm looking at his name. Well, Toronto gave him a bunch of money and a starting role. Probably not going to happen. But Kelly Oubre comes to mind. Lonnie Walker even comes to mind. Terrence Ross is actually still sitting out there. I don't know if that would be the worst thing to try if you're this team. Could you have done something for like a Kobe White, who was a restricted free agent, who I don't think Chicago necessarily cared about? Malik Beasley, not really a creator, but would have been another kind of Kennard type who's just a veteran guy who's not lost on offense. There's just, like Reggie Jackson, maybe he was always destined to go back to Denver, but I think that they're at the point watching them where I'm like, even that would have helped. But the reason that that's the case is these young guys. Tell me what you think David Roddy ideally is in the NBA. He's an incredibly unique player, but if you were to just say, like, the version of him that hits is blank, what even is the answer to that question?
Is it like a PJ Tucker who takes more threes? Like, is that, I mean, he's strong enough. He's got the frame. He's never going to be super big. He's obviously like 6'4", but he's thick. He's built like he's like a football player. That's what he looks like when you watch him and you see his frame. It feels like he is like a 4 who can dabble in some 3, but really tries to rebound well for you and takes corner threes and can attack closeouts and is willing to shoot and then muck it up on the defensive end. I think that's the path. And like, that's a guy that in theory, like, you could play Triple J at the 5 and him as your 4 and it function. But we're not really getting that from him. Like what PJ Tucker is kind of, I almost sometimes, he's not an all-star by any means, but I think what Tucker is there's like a testament to how that guy plays that I think you can't teach that. You can't teach that guy's willingness just to mix it up and be engaged all the time. That's like a real skill. That kind of physicality, as big as Roddy is and as bruising as he can be sometimes, hasn't always come through. And that to me is probably the biggest concern I would have with Roddy. One on top of the fact that like I don't think he's scaring defenses by any means as a shooter. Like he's not someone you're freaking out about if he's in the corner spotting up from 3.
It's probably the best comp. I looked at NBADraft.net. They tend to have some pretty good comps. They had him as George Niang. And I'm looking at PJ, not as good of a shooter, obviously, but I think, the Tucker thing makes sense. But when I watch Roddy, I'm like, he does not look as big as Tucker at all. But dimensionally, they're listed as kind of about the same thing. Like they have similar wingspan, similar height. The weight, actually, Roddy's listed as being heavier than Tucker, which does not feel possible to me personally. But okay, go off team PR staffs.
NBA weights are all fugazi. They're all bullshit.
I just don't. I mean, it's not even just a weight thing. He really does just look smaller. But obviously, the height and wingspan stuff. It's like the combine kind of doesn't lie.
But it's because, but Brendon, I think it's just because Tucker when Tucker plays that way, he feels bigger. It's how Pat Bev is not big, but Pat Bev feels like a big guard because Pat Bev is about that physical basketball life. When you play a certain way, I think it makes you feel like you got like the gamma radiation, like you're the fucking Hulk, and it makes you seem bigger. It's like you're Super Mario and you eat a mushroom, and it makes you bigger and feel bigger. That is not the case with Roddy. He's 22, so it's not that it's just maybe he's younger and all that stuff, but like it doesn't pop off the screen in the way you might hope it would for a guy that is naturally just that built. In his college film, I think gave you some indication that like there's like a bruiser.
I think the thing about those guys too, whether it's Tucker or Beverly or any number of other players, is they broke out late in their careers, or at least late in their life compared to what Roddy's at right now. And I think that to me kind of speaks to a little bit of what's going on here, where even though I might not believe in Roddy like as much as you, or you might not believe in Zaire Williams as much as me, and I've mentioned Jake LaRavia as somebody that I'm intrigued by, and I think he looks a little more physically ready to play this year. They've all had moments. You can kind of squint and maybe think there's something there. None of them are on par or on course to be Desmond Bane, and none of them are on course to even be like a nice find like Brandon Clark was. They just are appearing to be incredibly dependent players who are suddenly having to be much more than that. And that's why I thought, like, could a gunner guy have just rolled the ball out and at least given them some structure? Even if the structure is this guy's going to shoot like 42% and turn it over quite a bit, sometimes that's probably better than what their offense looks like when Bane is not on the floor. Do you have any Jaren thoughts? That might be the only guy we haven't talked about, because when I watch them, I think that when he is able to operate in space one-on-one, whether that's in transition or in a face-up or a seal or just a quick shooting, scoring opportunity, he draws fouls well. That all still is working, even without a setup man like Tyus Jones or Ja around. But I just don't know how old is Jaren? 24. Just turned 24. There's a little still to go, but right now he is not ready to be an offensive engine. And I think we just kind of know that now. I mean, it's been almost a full year of basketball without Ja at this point, and that's just not been what he's been able to do.
I think we just might know what he is, and that's, again, like he could still add it in some way, but he's not even... Like, I don't think of Bam as necessarily like an offensive engine, but Bam does a bunch of things that are really additive to an offense. That
an engine, I think. Yeah.
But he can also like hurt you in the middle of the floor, and you're kind of scared of him. And Jaren doesn't totally feel that way. It feels kind of like when you get a big scoring out of him, it feels a little bit like oh, okay, that happened. Good, we need to take advantage of that. So I think I'm full step with you on Jaren. The other, I guess the last thing, and I wasn't thinking Jaren. I was thinking about Taylor Jenkins for a second, Brendon, because this is year 5 for him. And
They are worse with
I
Jaren
don't-
on
I'm
than
not
off
a-
this year, just to add that nugget too. They're worse when he's on the court so far.
That's which is
Small
weird.
sample, but I mentioned it with Bane,
weird.
so.
Yeah. Yeah. Team's just bad.
Taylor Jenkins.
Seems just year 5. Is it possible that he just like could you see a world where he's like a fall guy in all of this and they just have to like I don't know, like everything just kind of feels on the table right now to me a little bit, if I'm being honest.
Sure. I mean, I think it is. I think to me, if you're making the case against Taylor Jenkins, and I want to remind that I did praise the defense, and I think a lot of that is him. So
yes,
that has stayed, and I do think that will level out. They'll be able to win some probably 93, 91 types of games if they win at all in the near future. Maybe you'll get a Derrick Rose game, whatever. But that is Jenkins to me. The case against him would be off the court, the locker room stuff, and I just think it's kind of hard to pin that on him when we know the extent to which Ja was a problem in and of himself, separate from anything else going on. Ja just had issues. And I don't know if anyone else on this roster necessarily does. So it would sort of be like blaming Ja's issues on Taylor Jenkins. That doesn't feel fair. But that would be the only way I could see it. Otherwise, obviously, like things are stale. You see coaches get fired for that stuff all the time. But I would blame Zach Kleiman personally.
Yeah, but this is the way this works. Is the GM gets a chance to fire a coach? I feel for coaches in this. I feel for coaches because you look around the league at a lot of different situations that are not the coach's fault, where a coach could get fired. Let's say like a Chris Finch in Minnesota, for instance, is someone like if things don't go wrong and they change coaches, he didn't choose to bring in Rudy Gobert. Maybe he had some input. I don't fully know, but like coaches get fired because the front office guys are the ultimate ones and it's a chance for them to save their job and fire the guy below them and extend themselves. But I agree with you. I mean, Zach Kleiman is the one who didn't just like throw all the picks they had in for someone who was more proven, who traded for Justice Winslow in a trade that did not work, who has seemingly missed on a lot of draft picks.
It's crazy how fast.
Yes, he got Bane, but like
flip. I mean, Kleiman was like the jewel of the NBA for a while with the way that he built the core of this team, and they still have that core. I don't think a new coach would change much. I think you kind of are what you are if Ja is your point guard at the end of the day. He's going to have the ball. He doesn't really spot up. He's fine off the ball. It's not like impossible, but that's going to be how you play offense. Your half-court offense is going to be a question mark. Like, I think a lot of the things are personnel, and so I'm going to blame the guy who controls personnel, but you're totally right, of course. I think if things really go badly this year, maybe they make some trades, but they would probably fire Taylor Jenkins. Then Zach gets one more year. And then if he can't do it, then maybe ownership fires him. But I don't know. I don't know what there's not going to be an early season move. Trades like that don't happen. So
no.
They're kind of stuck with this, and then
unless
hope Ja
like
does fix some things, and they're not too far out of it by then.
Yeah, and what I think if there's a lesson about this broader, Brendon, to spin this out a little bit, and maybe this is an episode we can do later when we see where this ends up. I think for teams that find success in some way, that particularly I would say like smaller market franchises, Minnesota, Cleveland, Memphis, like go around the league, go to the smaller markets that are never like they have to draft and they're going to have a hard time bringing in the biggest name players. I think Sacramento I would put in this as well. When you get when the window presents itself, I think you owe it to yourself, your organization, your fan base to try to push it through as best as possible and as aggressively as possible. Because 5 years out is not guaranteed. A year out is not really guaranteed. 2 years out is not guaranteed. I think you owe it to yourself to, within reason, push things aggressively as possible. And I would wonder if you look back at Memphis, you ask Zach Kleiman in ownership there, do you regret not being a little bit more aggressive in pursuing this? I wonder if they would say yes. I would tend to think they would. And I think if I'm all these other teams that are in not exactly one-to-one comps, but similar situations in terms of needing to maximize whatever is in front of them right now, I think they owe it to themselves to pursue things in a really aggressive way. Like if I'm Sacramento, yes, I'm really happy with Keegan Murray, and I'm really happy with the internal development, but I'm trying to maximize this as best I can because you can't guarantee that this is going to hold up for as long as you think it might on paper.
This situation, some of these problems would be here this year with Ja.
Yes, 100%. But the Ja situation and him being suspended, and I think rightfully suspended, and all of the other concerns, you read the ESPN story, all that stuff, that has exasperated everything. Because there's not your franchise bedrock was not a bedrock for you, and you probably needed him to be that bedrock for you.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder, did those, miracle records with Ja off that we saw for years and some of that stuff just give them rose-colored glasses? It gave a lot of us that. I think it would have been reasonable, but as I listed off at the beginning, how many of those vets are gone now? Like the guys who gave you those great records with Ja hurt, that isn't here. So it could never have persisted that way. You were going to have to do something. And yeah, you can't plan for Ja missing 25 games, but as we just said, I don't even know if Ja's going to fix this at this point. So this feels like a team that should be on watch to do something pretty dramatic at some point this year. I think we can say that for sure.